subscribing, and leaving comments.
In my previous video, I noted that Ray Wallace was a jokester, a prankster, and a hoaxer. I stated that even Ray Wallace's wife, Elna, admitted to wearing an ape suit for her husband while he filmed her pretending to be a Bigfoot. A viewer of that video questioned those assertions and wrote the following comments. This video appears to be a smear job since it offers no supporting evidence of the claims it makes. Where's the video of his wife saying it was her in a suit? In all fairness, the commentator is correct in stating that I offered no supporting evidence. Those who follow Sasquatch research history have seen the evidence and need no convincing of Ray Wallace's shenanigans. But for the newer folks who aren't familiar with the history, here are two news clips pertaining to Ray Wallace. The first will show Wallace's widow admitting that she wore a monkey suit for her husband. This should be all the supporting evidence needed. Enjoy.
For decades with little success, now a Washington state family says they might have some answers. NBC's Chip Reed explains.
He was caught on camera 35 years ago, a brief shaky image of an ape-like creature stomping through the woods of Northern California. Since then, he's been seen nowhere and everywhere. He's been on TV and in the movies.
No, don't think I'm crazy, Sergeant, but it's Bigfoot.
There's an international Bigfoot society, Bigfoot websites, and Bigfoot skis. You can even buy your own pair of Bigfoot imprints, just $29.95. But before you buy, you might want to hear from the Wallace family.
We know for a fact who Bigfoot is.
Bigfoot, they say, was Ray Wallace, the family patriarch. When he died last month at 84, they decided it was finally time to tell the family secret. According to the Wallace family, it all began back in 1958. Ray Wallace was in charge of a road construction crew, and he wanted to play a practical joke on one of his buddies. So he arrived at work early one morning, and he brought a pair of these wooden feet. He strapped them to his shoes like this, and he walked around the construction site like this, in soft soil. And that is how the legend of Bigfoot began.
It was just a joke, just to get people, scare them a little bit or make them think a little bit, but it just really went over big.
The local paper picked it up, coined the term Bigfoot, and soon the whole nation was talking about it. Ray even took his tall tales to the airwaves.
Well, they're looking like a giant-sized man, about 9 feet tall.
9 feet?
Yep, the females are about 7 feet tall.
My God.
Baby Bigfoot.
Ray stomped all over California, Oregon, and Washington, creating an entire Bigfoot family. He even convinced his very reluctant wife, just once, to dress up in a monkey suit for pictures.
I said, just think, somebody comes over to the top of that hill and sees me in this suit. They'll shoot me, think I'm Bigfoot.
So, was that Elna Wallace in that famous image? Well, she says no. Her monkey suit was different, and the family isn't sure who or what that was. Bigfoot researcher Jeff Meldrum says the search for Bigfoot will go on. He has dozens of footprints and eyewitness accounts that aren't explained by anything Ray Wallace might have done.
This outlandish claim that he's responsible for the entire Bigfoot phenomenon is just silly.
The Wallaces agree. Even Ray couldn't have planted all the evidence. They just want the world to know what they know.
Bigfoot is Ray L. Wallace. No question.
Your father.
My father.
And
Your father and your husband.
I'm Mrs. Bigfoot.
Mrs. Bigfoot says her husband was a good man who never meant any harm. He just couldn't resist a good joke, even if it lasted a lifetime. For today, Chip Reed, NBC News, Castle Rock, Washington.
Continuing Bigfoot breaking news later on MSNBC.
Isn't that what they call you over there?
Bigfoot?
Just kidding. Liv Tyler coming up, but first your local news.
Well, I still believe in Bigfoot. Don't care what they say. Still believe in apple pie and the good old USA.
Well, our thanks to the Newsnight Orchestra. You know what they say about people who are plagued with delusions? Be careful not to shatter the fantasy. They just might get dangerous. We keep that in mind when thinking about a good friend to our program. He's clinging for dear life to a fantasy, even though front-page headlines last week seemed to have exposed it all as a big hoax. But for our own good, we're not about to tell him to give up his belief. And so with that, we say simply this. Yes, Scott Harriet, there is a Bigfoot.
Bigfoot burst onto the international scene in 1958 when a road builder named Jerry Crew came out of the thick forest of northwest California with this cast of what appears to be a giant human-like footprint. Now, nearly 45 years later, there are some that think Bigfoot has died after family members of a deceased logger named Ray Wallace claim that old Ray started the whole shebang with these wooden feet.
You're looking at the original Bigfoot feet.
Are these the objects that made the oversized prints found in 1958? No, says John Green, longtime Canadian Bigfoot author and eyewitness to some of these and other tracks found around the same time, some of which were cast in what Green says was very hard sand and soil.
For somebody to come along and say all you have to do is put a pair of wooden feet on and go out for a walk, and all the press of all the world proclaim that this has solved the mystery, it's pretty ridiculous and pretty hard to take.
Dale Lee Wallace had agreed to bring the wooden feet and be interviewed. But on the day before the shoot, he called and said his cousin had the wooden prints locked away and was out of town. As luck would have it, John brought a similar pair of fiberglass fakies.
That's what we're going to use to see whether or not you can make fake tracks.
Which he says came from a mold made by Bob Titmus, a late researcher who also found tracks in the late 50s. Child senses the beast is near. Bigfoot's real, we're just doing a demonstration. Green feels the Wallace fake feet are derived from copies Titmus had made from that cast. I tried to make a good impression. Think of maybe a salad there, Tom? God. Okay.
There's 400 pounds.
There's, yeah. About an inch here, and not much more than a quarter of an inch there. Green also claims that the first nationally publicized photo of the first print cast at that time doesn't come close at all to matching what Dale Lee Wallace has been holding up in newspapers over the past month. But enough about the Wallace affair. What about the eyewitnesses?
Out into this 30-foot wide clear opening stepped this humongous 7 or 8 foot tall creature. I would guess weighed somewhere between 600 and 800 pounds, walking with this very pronounced long arm swing.
Some of the evidence appears in a documentary on the Discovery Channel. Producer Doug Hychek tells what got him interested.
Back in the early 90s, I made an expedition up to a lake called Selwyn Lake, which is up in the Northwest Territories in Canada. And we came upon a trackway of footprints that were absolutely amazing. They were 18 inches long. They had a stride of about 5.5 to 6 feet. From that moment on, I wanted answers.
When asked if she thought Sasquatches were real, primatologist Jane Goodall said, quote, "You'd be amazed when I tell you that I'm sure that they exist." So the Wallace family may feel that old Ray gave birth to Bigfoot, but it may very well be science that puts it to death. Or something like that. Scott Harriet for Newsnight from somewhere in the Pacific Northwest.
More fake. Big, fat, stinking hoax. Told you a couple months back that the family of the late Ray Wallace is saying that their dad sparked the Bigfoot craze in the 50s with a pair of wooden shoes. Now the full story of why Mr. Wallace would want to do that and crush so many dreams in a Fox report from Dan Springer.
When Washington State resident Ray Wallace recently died at the age of 84, the Seattle Times pronounced the death of one of the world's most enduring mysteries. Wallace's family says their dad, wearing these carved wooden feet, gave birth to the legend of Bigfoot.
My dad has a real knack for not only starting the spark, but fanning the flame.
A logger, Wallace worked all over the Northwest. In 1958, he was in Humboldt County, California, where huge tracks found near his crew's camp ignited the speculation, bringing the Sasquatch of Indian lore into the media spotlight. John Green has been tracking Bigfoot for 5 decades.
Well, we were investigating a real phenomenon. The tracks are real. Something real has to have been there to make them.
Green and others remain convinced the hairy ape men exist, and he tried to debunk Wallace's claim by showing us that a man wasn't heavy enough to make the inch-deep footprints. The timing of Wallace's death is especially bad for believers because mainstream scientists were becoming more willing to at least consider the existence of the Sasquatch, raising hopes for a real study on the subject. But most scientists remain skeptical, ridiculing the famous Patterson film, and continuing to ask why, after all these years, have no Bigfoot bones or even hair been found. A fellow logger says Ray Wallace would make tracks about once a month, and that he too made short films using a Bigfoot costume.
I know for a fact there was a Bigfoot and who he was.
So is the mask really pulled off of Bigfoot? While some still believe, many others are ready to bury the controversy right next to Ray Wallace. In Seattle, Dan Springer, Fox News.
If you're enjoying all this rare and unique content, please show your support by subscribing and leaving comments.